20th, 2016, the meeting of the Riverton City Council Finance Committee to order at 6:45 p.m. The chair would entertain a motion of the consideration of claims.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to pay the amount of $543,332.14, and then checks written for payroll and liabilities for September 2nd in the amount of $212,963.29, and for a total of $756,905.43.
Second.
Do you have any questions on the bills?
I've got several questions. There was a bill in there for about $260,000 to 71. Is that, what project is that?
Madam Chairwoman, we have a total for 71 construction for 3 different projects. The first of which is our Broadway Monroe overlay. The second is the Pershing drainage and asphalt project. And then the third is the Cliffview lift station project. So cumulatively, it reaches at 260 for those 3 different projects.
And then I've got one more question. We have a statement in here for roughly $36,000 to a local engineering company, and I'm wondering if we have got any findings back on the monitoring of the wells that they're monitoring. Enberg Miller Old Landfill Sampling, Landfill Well Monitoring, $4,058. Do we have a report on that yet?
Madam Chairwoman, I haven't seen that report as far as any negative hits from the samples.
No, I didn't ask that question. Do we have the sample points or the information back yet so that we might be interpreting of the information?
Madam Chairwoman, we can get access to that report.
Thank you. I'd like one.
Okay.
That's all I have.
No, I had mine answered before.
Okay. Then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Then motion passes. Is there any other business, Stephen?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Meeting's adjourned.
Meeting of the Riverton City Council to order at 7 p.m. Would Councilmember Martinez lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and after that, Councilmember Larson will offer an invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our eternal Heavenly Father, we are thankful for the opportunity to serve on the Riverton Council. Father, bless us with insight and understanding that we might have thy wisdom to do the best we possibly can for the citizens of Riverton. Watch over and protect them. We humbly ask this in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Would the city secretary please conduct a roll call?
Yes, Your Honor. Councilmember Mike Bailey.
Here.
Councilmember Martin Canan.
Here.
Councilmember Lee Martinez.
Here.
Councilmember Kyle Larson.
Here.
Councilmember Sean Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Holly Gibbon. Here. Mayor John Lars Baker.
I am present and declare that we have a quorum. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Your Honor, make a motion that we approve the agenda as written.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Mayor votes aye, and the motion passes. Communication from the floor, citizens' comments. Anyone wishing in the audience wishing to address the council regarding an item that's already on the agenda this evening will be given an opportunity to speak later on. I would ask those individuals who wish to address the council at this time to approach the podium and identify yourselves for the record.
Before I start, can this be set so I don't knock it off of here or anything? Sorry. My name is Warren Olmsted. This is my wife Candy. We live at 811 Wolf Creek Drive. I'm going to try to get through this the best I can. So if you just bear with me, I'm just going to read this stuff that I've got. As I'm sure you remember, I was here on July 5th. And one of our concerns was to have a fence put up to protect our dog, Cody, in our backyard from all the construction trash that we were always picking up and the dog was getting into. My wife had called and spoke with the mayor back in March or April about having the apartment owners put a privacy fence up, and the mayor said to her that that is something we can do, and told my wife he would get back to her. She never got a phone call back about that. On July 5th, Sandy Lures said that a fence had been talked about a couple of months or so back, but had not heard anything yet. But she could sure check into it tomorrow. And we received a letter from you guys a couple weeks after that, I know that. Pictures here. And my wife's got a couple pictures here. This is our dog, Cody. He's not a mutt, and not just our dog, but a part of our family, and he's from champion bloodlines, a purebred German Shepherd. And anybody that wants to call him a mutt is wrong. I don't care who you are. Had a fence been put up when my wife called about it in March or April, it's very likely Cody would be alive today. Cody had 3 seizures last Tuesday evening, and we took him in around 9 p.m. and had to have him put down. He would not have survived the night. 33 seizures over 4 months instead of a fence to protect our property and protect our dog makes no sense to us. Cody paid the ultimate price for all of this. I'd like to know how any of you would feel if this was your dog or your pet. My wife called Jason Bull 2 weeks ago. That's the guy out of Montana that's in charge of a lot of this. And he said because my wife had called him a liar, and because I went to a reporter, he didn't want to do anything for us. He did lie. Now we are under the understanding that the apartments next to us are low-income apartments, which were not supposed to be when this all started a year ago in May or whenever it was. I didn't go to a reporter. There was an article in the newspaper because this is recorded up here, and I assume there's reporters up here for the council meetings. So Jason Bull was wrong, but he wanted to be petty about stuff and not worry about doing anything for us. I've always thought that, you know, the city council and even the builders and stuff would look out to protect the citizens. Apparently I'm wrong. We had to tear up half of our backyard, tear our dog kennel out because it was poison for the dog. No one wanted to put a fence up because it was not in the budget, yet we have spent $2,480.84 in all of this out of our budget because no one would put a fence up and because someone's feelings were hurt. What about Cody? It wasn't in our budget either. I have copies of what this cost. Most of these are vet bills, but there's also in here what we paid for Cody when we bought him 2 years ago, and I'd like to give each one of you a copy of this. Most are vet bills and medication, and also the rock we bought to rock half of our backyard, and what we paid for Cody when we bought him 2 years ago. We feel that we deserve to be reimbursed for our costs and would appreciate a response from you in the next 2 weeks. And just think how any of you would respond if this was done to you and your family pet. Look at your pets tonight if you have one or any. Think about family members that you care about that have a pet. Imagine that dog or cat out in the yard or wherever, just playing, and then all of a sudden he collapses, goes into convulsions, twitching, laying on his side with all 4 legs going like he's running, foaming at the mouth, running in midair 33 times. And all of this because of the tar paper that dog got into. There's a sweetness in tar paper. Anybody can look it up. It's toxic to the animals. My dog, our dog, got it because nobody wanted to put up a fence like we had asked about previously. One thing my wife did get from the mayor is, well, the city council is going to look into this stuff, and we're going to change things and call it the Olmstead Act so that this doesn't happen to people again. I don't want my name on anything like that. This was all wrong to begin with. We had legitimate concerns of this right from the beginning, but I sure didn't know it was going to cost us our dog. Our dog was 2 years old, and he did not deserve what he got.
All I have to say is shame on all of you. You failed us. You're supposed to work for the citizens of Riverton. You work for a man out of Montana and Casper. You did us wrong. How could you? Shame on all of you.
And we would appreciate a response in a couple weeks if we could, please.
I'll write you a personal letter,
Okay?
okay?
Yep. You can get upset with me if you want. I don't care. Any of you. Want to say anything to me? I don't care. But what has happened to my dog is uncalled for. Should have never happened. And I think you should know it.
20 seconds. 20 seconds. Putting my hand on my dog's chest for his heart to stop and his breathing to stop. And to tell him I loved him 20 seconds.
Your Honor.
Mr. Larson?
If this had been a 2-year-old child, we'd be sitting in a lawsuit.
No?
Yeah.
I don't think it's safe to compare that.
Well, yeah, I
Maybe it
can,
is.
because lead-based paint is sweet, and kids eat it all the time. And products that are injurious to animals or to possibly human beings, I'd have to read the MSDS on that. I know I didn't vote for that structure to go up, and I argued with everybody here about it. And we talked about lot size and expanding lots, and we had no authority to say anything about that. Well, our chickens have come home to roost. Thank you.
Your Honor,
Mr. Bailey?
I guess, to me, I mean, this comes down to, it's definitely the responsibility of the contractor, I think, to make sure they keep their house in order and keep their mess cleaned up. And I guess if anywhere we've failed, it's that we didn't enforce that happening. And I know that after we had talked to them originally, I had talked to the Public Works, or the, building department, and I know they were going to look into that, so I don't know where that ended up coming up, but I guess we obviously need to do a better job of keeping track and making sure that contractors are keeping their construction sites contained and cleaned up and that kind of stuff, because I guess that's really the root of this entire problem. Because, I mean, if we're responsible for anything, that's what it would be, I guess, to me.
Your Honor, I have one question, and it pertains to this. Was there any laws broken? So
Your Honor, when we found out that there was debris and things, we have talked to that contractor many, many times. They, you know, to the best of our knowledge, they did clean up a lot of the property. They did a lot of things. When the wind blows, things happen, and we did go ahead and make sure that they were keeping things cleaned up. We worked with them several times. We had them clean the streets more often than would normally happen during that type of thing. They picked up they picked up in the evenings every night. Again, that was obviously a little bit later on, once we realized there was more of a problem. The construction site, anytime we were up there, was not any different than any other construction site. It was probably cleaner than most were. Like I said, we worked with them quite a bit. We did ask about the fence. It was not a requirement on the, in our codes or in the building codes. A fence was not required. We have done several other things to try to mitigate some of these things, and, you know, I'm very sorry of what happened. We did what we felt we could do and what we could do as the city. They did not do anything against the law or against our codes. We did as much as we felt we could do, and we worked with them several times. I mean, probably 20 times. I mean, we went up and worked on that. I had my inspector go up and make sure each time we heard anything, we made sure that we went up and talked to the manager and made sure that they were going a little bit overboard on keeping things cleaner. I'm sure the wind didn't help things when it blew, and if it blew that direction. They did give some materials to the Olmsteds which I think they built a kennel out of that. The contractors did that, and had given them some other things I don't recall right now to try to help a little bit with that. But it's sad. I totally understand that.
So now, if this piece of property had been rezoned to commercial, then the code would have required them to put up a fence, correct?
That's correct.
Because it'd separate commercial zoning from residential zoning.
That's correct.
Because this is still residential, this is all residential B, and residential B, under our current rules, allows sixplexes.
Correct, and, yeah.
Then,
Up to-
then they could, then the only control over that would be for us to have opposed a replat of the, okay? And under those circumstances, may have blocked that activity, but we couldn't stop a replat because?
Because it wasn't against any of our rules in our codes.
It's not a violation to replat.
It was not a violation.
Replat is not.
It was not a
As
violation.
long as it doesn't cover up rights of ways and utility easements and access and that type of thing.
That's correct.
Okay, so I guess my thought, as I've discussed this with the Olmsteds many times, is that this reflects two things. One is, we need to do a better job with our code, okay, on construction, zoning, okay, so that we don't have this particular kind of a situation occurring again. Okay, in other words, we need to do a better job of separating obviously commercial residential from single-family housing. Okay, and then the other thing that we need to think about when we talk, you know, and her question is what is the duty of the city? Okay, and is it the duty of the city to intervene in this situation and sue the contractor for the damages that the Olmsteds have incurred? Well, I don't think we have any standing to do that, but the Olmsteds do. And I've suggested to her several different occasions that she had civil action as a recourse. So so that's the situation that I see ourselves in, is that their expectations of what the city should be able to do for them in preventing what the neighboring property use is, okay, is out of step with what we're actually able to accomplish. Mr. Bailey.
Again, I'm not saying that the city council ourselves had anything to do with this, because, I mean, we heard their complaints, we passed it on to the building department. I mean, the property was being put on a piece of property that was zoned appropriately, but whether they were building a sixplex or a garage, I think the issue that they have is that material got spread over onto their property. So, I mean, whether it was a sixplex or a 20-story building, same thing could have happened. So, I mean, to me, it really comes down to a housekeeping issue. I don't think city council can control the housekeeping of one person against another, but if we're in the building process, we can, I don't know if the code says anything even about that the housekeeping kinds of things, where keeping materials under a tarp or contained or whatever, you know, to me, that's where the problem was. It really wasn't that this was a sixplex or this was a fourplex or it was a brand new $200,000 house. The same thing could have happened. And again, I think the Olmsteds do have an issue with the contractor, but the contractor didn't get to be the one sitting up here and get the wrath of all of that. And I understand them being upset, and I think they have a reason to be. But I don't think the city council's necessarily at blame for that. I think it's the contractor not taking care of their business the way they should. And so as the city, we have to try to make sure that doesn't happen again. And, you know, you see on some construction sites, they put up that woven fence kind of stuff so that the stuff doesn't blow across to the next guy. You know, I'm the last one's going to stand up here and say we should add more regulations to people and trying to get things done, because it just causes us to have less development. But again, we can't put other people at a burden when somebody's doing a project, and that wouldn't matter whether it was commercial or on the highway or residential. I mean, I think the same things all still apply. And so, and us as the city gets to be the buffer in between those, unfortunately, and so we have to take that, you know, with a grain of salt, because, I mean, none of us threw junk on their property. This was the contractor that let stuff get on their property, so.
Your Honor, I guess if we want to carry this any further, my suggestion would be that for residential area versus commercial is to have the planning commission take a look at the codes again. And I know I was on the planning commission and we did this a couple, 2 or 3 years ago, went through all the codes. But that's the only solution I can see. I am with Councilman Bailey that we have no responsibility of what happens. We can't fix what happened.
Can you say something? I think on this specific topic, or this spot, it's because of where it's being built. I think it all goes back to when we all voted. Again, I voted no. I thought it was absolutely not the perfect, idealistic spot. I think they were, as a homeowner, they should have more rights, and I think that now they're kind of like in a rock and a hard spot. They're right up against it. So consequently, you know, I think to listen to them and to hear their hearts breaking and to know that they lost their dog, I mean, no offense, come on, guys. Like, if it was any of us, we would be throwing a massive fit if that was any of our dogs or that was our pets. We would be heartbroken right now. But because it isn't, we can have that different opinion. We don't have to have that emotional. We're all logical right now. But if it was, we would be flippin' mad, and you all know it. You're just not willing to say it. So consequently, we're sitting here and we're kind of in a sense being like, well, you know, it's the contractor and it's this. But no, realistically, we failed and you guys know it. And if you want to shake your head, it's okay. But really, we failed. And if it was your dog or your cat, you know that you guys would be upset. And so consequently, I do have to agree with them. And I feel like they have come multiple times and they've asked for our help and they've told us their problems. And if we would have just helped them, I mean, they were there first. They had that house. They bought that property. And I kind of feel like we chased the mighty dollar. There's a thing on Facebook about saying that it doesn't cost you anything to be a decent human being. And Lee, you liked it. Sean, you liked it. You guys shared it. I shared it. Yet when it comes down to it, we sold it out for making money, so it made sure that we're getting that property tax money. I kind of feel like we didn't do right. And very rarely do I really speak my mind, but this is one of those topics I feel like we failed. And if it was next to our house and if it was our animals, we would feel differently. But it's because it's not. And I get the whole, it's the way that it's zoned and stuff, and I get all of that. But look at it from the other side of the fence. Don't look at it because we're on city council. Look at it if it was your property and you were there and you had built your life there. They can't move because nobody's going to buy that property. They can't rent it because they can't go and afford a new property. Nobody wants to live there. They're just stuck. And now they lost their pet. It's not just an animal. It's a pet. It's a family member. I totally disagree with this entire situation. And I don't know about you guys, and maybe it is. You know, I'll say it. Maybe it's because I'm a woman, and maybe it's because I'm a little emotional. But I know that my little boy, he loses his dog. If I was in that situation, I'd be in tears just like they are. So I feel like in this one, if you guys honestly look within yourselves and really think about it, if it was your guys' pets and it was your guys' family and it was in your backyard, you'd be singing a different tune. And that's all.
Your Honor, I've been in a situation where I have lost my pets, and not because of my fault, because of somebody run over them, somebody poisoned them. And I know exactly how they feel. But I also know that it's our duty that we can't foresee anything that's going to happen in the future, period. We
This
can't
isn't
tell it.
foreseen in the future. We allowed it. We said it was okay. We allowed this builder to come in, and then we
Let me
allowed it.
finish my
We didn't do
statement before
anything.
you interrupt, okay?
This is so wrong.
So I have lost pets before too, and they are family. And I agree with you 100%. They are family, and I lost them. But there's only certain things that we can do. Sometimes you got to do something yourself. Thank you.
Your Honor.
Mr. Larson.
Is it possible to look at, the whole problem was we have land that is zoned appropriately, and when I go in and buy it, I can expand that footprint to fit a sixplex or an eightplex. And I can make a deal on that versus if it were our zoning that didn't allow it. That would make it more expensive to do that, and that would stop the speculation and the deal-making on small pieces of land where I can expand it. That particular piece of property was zoned single-family dwelling,
No,
up to duplexes. Yeah, it was.
Yes, it was.
no, residential B up to a sixplex. Residential B
But-
allows a sixplex.
But it doesn't allow it on that size of footprint.
That's correct. You'd have to
Yeah.
replat to do it.
Yeah, and so we can replat it, and we can allow that speculation to occur. So I'm a smart buyer, I can come in and buy a single family and put in a sixplex by simply buying several lots and expanding the footprint so that it meets guidelines. Our responsibility is to ensure that people who buy land get to use it for that purpose, single-family dwelling. Now, we have through Riverton fourplexes that are in residential areas. Stupid. It's the stupidest thing that ever happened. Why? Because it hurts the value of the property next door. And the next door people are there first, and their savings is that house. Their largest savings is that house. For me to come in and be able to put in a fourplex or a sixplex next to another house, if that happened on the golf course, there would be hell to pay. And so it's our responsibility to protect people. That's all I'm saying, that not to allow failed developers to come in and say, well, hey, I can put this money in and I'll bring the money in from Casper and build this for low income or whatever and make a deal and be gone. I'll bet you one nail wasn't bought in Riverton or the sheetrock or anything else. We don't make a deal on anything. We're a patsy. Thank you.
Your Honor.
Go ahead, Stephen.
I was just going to say that, I mean, the point of changing the code is to avoid what Councilman Larson is talking about. The intent of changing the code is to say in B zone, what do you want to be allowed? Is it up to a duplex, that's it? In single family A, you're only going to allow single family dwelling. B can be only up a duplex, and then you'd go on to R2, R3, and then you get up into higher densities. But right now, yeah, in a B zone, you're allowed to have a sixplex. And the issue with the replats, you have to deny the application that's before you based on the merits of it, not based on what it's going to be. You have to base it on it didn't have the proper drainage or you didn't have the right easement. You can't say, because I know what this is going to be, you can't do that, because that'd be going against our code, which I guess you can go against your own code, but why have a code then?
We did it with Tractor Supply Store.
It was a rezone.
Is it possible to change the code so it's more specific?
Oh, it is. It is.
No. Single family dwelling up to duplex.
It is. All we got to do is take that, get that through the planning commission, do the work to make it happen, bring it to the council, 3 readings, changes the ordinance, and then we have new law. Okay?
Your Honor.
Mr. Bailey?
And again, no offense to anybody, but we're getting way off track here. Okay,
Well,
this dog did not die from a sixplex. Okay, if it would have been a $300,000 huge fancy home, the same thing could have blew over the fence and this dog could have ingested it. So to blame this dog on our zoning code is ridiculous. Okay, it is pure and simple. The contractor didn't keep their house clean. They let their junk blow across the fence. That's it. Okay, and if we have a way to prevent that, I'm all for it. Now, if you can give them a fine for littering or whatever, I'm all for that. Okay, but to blame a sixplex on this or whatever is ridiculous. Now, if we don't want sixplexes in residential B, we need to go through the process and get that changed just like we're supposed to, and I'm fine if we get through there and that's what happened. Okay, but we can't blame the death of a dog on a sixplex. Okay, now, after the sixplex is in there and all the residents do stuff and have a problem killing the dog, then you can blame it on that if you want, maybe, but that's even pushing it. Okay, it's still an individual who does something that's the problem. Okay, it's not the sixplex. And I agree, I wouldn't want sixplex next to my house either, but I don't live in a B residential area, and I know that when I bought my house. So, again, like Kyle said, if you buy a residential B and it says you can build a fourplex and you build a fourplex, you're not doing anything wrong, unless you let all your shingles blow across the street onto the next guy's yard and kill his dog. Then it's the contractor's fault. It's not the fourplex's fault, okay?
I'll try to put something together, okay? Steve and I will work on a letter, and Sandy, and we'll try to put something together, a response for the city. Okay?
That would be helpful, yes.
All right. Is there anybody else in the audience that wants to address the council under this item of open discussion? Okay, the next item of business is consent agenda. Would the finance director please read the consent agenda items by title only?
Yes, Your Honor. Approval of the minutes, September 6, 2016, regular council meeting. Approval of the minutes, September 13th, 2016, work session council meeting. Approval of the minutes, September 20th, 2016, finance committee meeting. Approval of the finance committee recommendations, September 20th, 2016. Replat Country Club Villages, first edition, 71B and 72B. And an open container permit applications, Third Base Sports Bar, September 24th through 25th, 2016, for softball tournament at the softball fields from 12 p.m. to 12 a.m.
Thank you. Are there any items requiring further discussion?
Recommendations from the Finance Committee for claims to be paid in the amount of $543,332.14. Checks written for payroll liabilities for 9/2/16 in the amount of $212,963.29 for a total of $756,295.43.
Thank you. I have a concern about the open container permit applications. So I don't know how to, should we pull that out of the consent and talk about it separately? Okay, I'd like to do that.
Do we need a motion for that, Your Honor?
I think so.
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion that we pull the open container permit application and discuss that in a separate issue.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? That amendment to the agenda, or the consent agenda, has been made. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda with the open container permit application removed for further discussion.
Second?
Been moved and seconded to approve consent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I was going to say I abstain from Bailey Enterprises and Wex items and vote yes for the motion.
Thank you. All those okay, any opposed? And the mayor votes aye and the motion passes. So let's talk about softball tournament, the open container permit. Okay. I read that in the packet. So I don't know how this works. So are there concessions available there, supplied by others? You can buy hamburgers and soda pop and all that kind of stuff is available at the complex. So we don't have to, it's not like a catering permit where these guys are the sole source of of refreshments. Okay. And so then my question is, but is an open container permit the appropriate tool? Because here we've got a licensed liquor dealer who's going to be dispensing the alcohol and selling it.
Your Honor, it's similar to the Bar 10 issue we had before where they wanted to go out in the street. So they already have either a retail liquor license or a catering permit. But since it's on city property, it requires the open container permit.
Okay. Okay, so they have a catering permit too? Or they just do the open
No, just open container.
container, Chief?
Your Honor, they do have both. They have to take a catering permit, which has already been approved by the city, to take their liquor license off their property.
Right.
But then because they want to have open containers in a public park, then they also need the open container permit.
Thank you. Any other questions on this besides mine? Okay.
I mean, Your Honor, I mean, this is a little bit different than we've had before. And in the code, there's certain spots you cannot have open container permits, like City Park. But other ones are allowed. It just doesn't state, I don't think, as far as I've been here, we've never had one actually at the softball field. So it doesn't prohibit it, but it's different than the norm.
Always new territory, okay. So the chair would entertain a motion to approve
Your Honor,
the open container permits?
just 1 second. Is this malt liquor only, or is this hard liquor that they will be distributing or selling? I mean, is it beer and hot dogs?
Your Honor, a malt beverage permit is different than open containers, so they can serve more than just beer, I believe.
Mr. Mayor, because they have a full liquor license, the catering permit allows them to provide liquor, and then the open container permit would allow them to have unsealed alcohol in a public place.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, I would move that we approve the open container permit for Third Base Sports Bar for the softball fields.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Mayor votes aye. Motion passes. Consideration of discontinuing neighborhood recycling drop-off sites. Administrator's report.
Yes, Your Honor. So our last meeting was held last week on the 13th, and we discussed the recycling program. After much discussion, it was the consensus of the council to discontinue the neighborhood drop-offs on November 1st, 2016, and then to make curbside recycling more user-friendly. Staff is making that recommendation to discontinue for a couple of reasons. First, the city doesn't have the staff to sort the recyclables once CES discontinues. And second, the neighborhood drop-off locations are extremely contaminated with trash or other recyclables. And third, we need to make changes that make it more sustainable, meaning the recycling program needs to provide services that are closest to break even. Staff will continue to figure out ways to make the curbside program easier for the residents. Fremont Solid Waste District has graciously allowed the city to use a trailer that has more bins on it so that we can experiment in trying to pick up all materials instead of different ones on different weeks. Just so your knowledge, in the meeting on Monday, they also discontinued numbers 3 through 7, effective January 1st. So it would be our recommendation that we would discontinue the 3 through 7s when we discontinue on November 1st. Doesn't make sense to continue with 3 through 7s for 2 months and then discontinue it. We talked about at the work session some alternatives, like completely doing away with recycling altogether or eliminating the recycle incentive. The consensus was not to do that. So it's staff's recommendation to discontinue neighborhood recycling drop-off sites on November 1st, 2016. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I'd like to make the motion that we discontinue the neighborhood drop-off for recycling.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion?
Sir,
Mr.
I would modify that to also take Mr. Weaver's suggestion and discontinue picking up plastics 3 through 7 also at the same time on 1 November.
I'll take that as a friendly motion.
Okay, amendment? And
Second.
you're okay with that? On the second, okay? So we have a motion on the floor to discontinue the neighborhood recycling drop-off points and to discontinue the recycling of plastic 3 through 7. Okay,
Correct.
all right, Mr. Bailey?
And I apologize, I wasn't here last week to listen to the extensive discussion that you guys had. So this is the large recycling dumpsters that are sitting like at the Beals parking lot? That's the ones we're talking about. So we're going to continue the individual home recycling.
Curbside would continue as it is.
And then are those already sorted, or do they have multiple bins for the different products, or how does that work now, I guess?
Your Honor, what you mean when they pick them up? Yeah, they'll still have to be sorted. So when they go by to pick them up, they'll put out everything that we recycle, and then they stick it in the appropriate bins. So when they make it down to the CES drop-off site, they're already clean. We don't have any of the contamination like we do with the neighborhood drop-offs. Is that what answering?
Right, because, and that's where my question was going, is if CES is going to discontinue the sorting, so that means the residents are sorting their own, goes into a container that's sorted, and then So then the county takes over from there?
Your Honor, CS has agreed to help us with that. Even though they're discontinuing the sorting of it, they're going to be available to help with the transfer from our trailers to Fremont County Solid Waste District bins.
Okay. And then, does this, so we're reducing, are we reducing staff or anything like that to help offset costs? Or is it just getting rid of those containers?
Your Honor, there's not much reduction in staff, only in the sense that we'll have someone that will have more time to do other things. Because currently it's taking one staff member twice a week, all day, to empty and unload and bring back those drop-off centers.
So I do have a question, and this is something that I don't understand, and that is that we talk about solid waste says we're not going to take 3 through 7, okay, but they have been taking only number 1 bottles, not number 1 plastic. So there's a difference between number 1 bottles and number 1 plastic. At least at my house, I would say that well over half of the number 1 plastic has been in the other plastic bin. Because we're going to take number 1 bottles, number 2 bottles, and then everything else goes in the all other plastic. And so this has been confusing to me, doubly so when I went out here to dump some the other day to discover that one of the dumpsters here in the city parking lot was labeled number 1 plastic bottles on one side, and the same bin was labeled on the other side, all plastic. And so obviously people are confused as to what we're actually supposed to put in the bin. So if it's got the little triangle with the number 1 on it, we're going to continue to recycle that.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to take all number 1 plastic, is that correct?
Yeah.
Sounds right.
Yep,
Number 1 and number 2 plastic, we're going to continue to take that. All right. Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mayor votes aye, and the motion passes. The next item is Riverton crime statistics presentation by Chief Broadhead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This conversation tonight, can you hear that okay as I come through the speaker? Once again, we've hit one of these national web pages that publish like the best place to retire, the richest towns in America, and unfortunately we hit the highest crime place in Wyoming. So we thought that maybe an explanation of what that means, where those numbers come from, how they compile this information might be helpful. I did this same presentation essentially in 2010 for essentially the same reason, but it occurs to me that most of the council has turned over since then. So I thought we could have a discussion about that pretty briefly. So the Uniform Crime Reports, this is a compilation of statistics that's kept across the nation. These are self-reported crime statistics that most law enforcement agencies in the United States are reporting and have been since about the 1930s, if I remember right. In the state of Wyoming, 57 Wyoming law enforcement agencies provide UCR reports, and that encompasses about 96% of Wyoming's population, and we send those to the Division of Criminal Investigation. As the FBI is trying to, and since the 1930s, tried to compile these, the whole purpose is to compare apples to apples. What's happening in New York City, what's happening in Memphis, what's happening in Riverton, Wyoming. So they have some basis for comparison of those crimes. The most serious offenses are titled Part 1 crimes. That's what we report. We also report some Part 2 crimes. But when you see these statistics published nationally, they're always talking about Part 1 crimes. Right? And so we'll talk about those a little bit more specifically. There are 8 Part 1 crimes. They're listed on the slide there: murder, rape, robbery, ag assault, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson. So just these crimes are included in the Part 1 index. Each of those has a specific definition for UCR purposes. If you can imagine, the law in Tennessee may be worded differently than the law in Montana, and so UCR has its own definition of what those crimes mean. I've used rape as an example because it's the most specific. Rape only includes sexual assaults that have forced penetration. Until 3 years ago, the victim had to be female to even be counted as a UCR statistic. So molestation cases, sexual contact cases are not reported as a UCR, if that makes sense. And we have like definitions for robbery, what constitutes a murder. In the state of Wyoming, we have a misdemeanor count of homicide, and those would not be reported. So to fit the specific definition of UCR is all we report. Where we get in trouble is this crime rate. And a crime rate under the UCR is based on any Part 1 crime per 10,000 in population. In 2015, our population for UCR purposes was listed, as you see, just over 11,000. And by comparison, in 2009, it was a little bit under 10.5. That becomes important because you're going to see that Part 1 crimes, whether it's a theft or whether it's a murder, count the same for the crime rate. All right, so they're talking any one Part 1 crime to the 10,000 population, which for Riverton, of course, with our population very close to 10,000, we're basically 1 for 1. You get a Part 1 crime, it counts against our crime rate. Our crime rate in 2015, which is the last full year of reporting, you can see it's 507.6, which means that there were 559 Part 1 crimes that we reported, and that is the highest rate in the state of Wyoming. What we need to do is drill into those stats a little bit and find out what's driving those numbers. So I have some comparison slides for other towns that are about our size, so we can kind of see what's driving those right. But I think you'll see that larceny, which even though the Part 1 crimes are supposed to be the 8 most serious crimes, so you think about murder and rape, larceny or theft is included as a Part 1 crime, and it includes every shoplifting. Okay? Every minor theft is included as a stat that counts the same as a homicide when we're talking about crime rates. So these are the cities that I chose to compare to because they tend to be in our half of the state, and they tend to have a population fairly close to ours. Here's the populations you can see from the 2015 stats. I included Lander, even though they're the smallest community on there, just because they're our neighbor. So if we compare murder rate or murder numbers from 2015, you can see that statistically those numbers are insignificant. Same thing with rape, and we're talking, essentially 1 a month or 1 every 2 months in Riverton, and somewhat less in other communities. Robbery, same thing. Again, robbery is pretty significant to the person who's robbed, but statistically a pretty insignificant number. Aggravated assault, you can see that even though our crime rate is much higher than Green River's crime rate, Green River had 48 ag assaults. Now, an aggravated assault is defined as either an injury, an assault that resulted in serious bodily injury, or a weapon was used as part of the assault. Burglary, I think that Councilman Canam brought this up, that was a pretty big jump for us in 2015. We tend to do around 40 to 45 burglaries a year. In 2015, we jumped up to 66. We're going to have to see if that's a trend that continues over the next 5, 6, 7 years, or whether we just had an anomaly in 2015. Again, motor vehicle theft, not insignificant numbers, and yet, again, we're talking about a couple a month. Here's where our crime rate definitely gets impacted, and that's because we report over 400 larceny cases a year. You compare us to Green River, who had, twice as many ag assaults. They only reported 95 thefts. I'm not sure that's an accurate number for them. Typically, year in and year out, they've been reporting more in the 150 range. I'm not sure what happened in 2015 for theft, but that's what they reported. But you can see, I'm sorry.
Chief, there's no dollar limit on that?
There's not. For the crime of larceny as a Part 1 crime, all they want to know is, did somebody take somebody else's stuff? But we do report the dollar amount. And so from our 400-some cases, our dollar loss in 2015 to larceny was over $322,000. But if we look at Jackson, who reported 138 theft cases, they had over $673,000 in loss. So I guess we could say that their stuff costs more than our stuff. But Generally speaking, again, I think that tells a different story than just looking at a crime rate. You know, even that Green River number, they're down, they only reported 95 thefts, but they're within $100,000 of our loss. And then here's how those numbers were parsed out for crime rate. You can see that our crime rate on paper looks significantly higher than some of these other towns, and yet I think we can clearly see that it's theft that's driving our number. Here's our crime rate. It's been fairly consistent. You can see there is a bit of a downward trend. 2014 was a pretty good year statistically, but again, you know, sometimes you'll have a really busy December and then a really slow January, and it can skew a year's numbers. We really have to look at this over, you know, a period of time. I really like to use statistics at least decade by decade, but as you can see, since 2009, that crime rate has remained fairly steady. And again, that's just Part 1 crimes that are staying steady. Other things that are being impacted by the things that we're doing in town are not appearing in this. As we address our public intoxication problem, you know, that's not being reflected any place. So that's where our rate's at. Okay, so my message to you tonight is that we have to be a little bit careful with statistics. That rates, 1 per 10,000, can be misleading. We certainly have some crime-related issues, as we're all aware of that, but I think that the majority of our citizens, I hope, feel safe walking down the street. We're not having street crime between strangers. You know, most crime occurs between people who know each other, with the exception of theft, right? But violent crime tends to occur in people groups. I hang out with people. I'm in more danger from the people I hang out with than from strangers. And that's why I think that stranger-on-stranger crime, particularly violent crime, is so shocking to us, because it's not what typically happens. Most of our aggravated assaults are occurring within groups that are either hanging out together at a bar, hanging out together in the dorms someplace, roommates, domestic violence, or some of our folks who live on the street that are assaulting each other. So I think that the thing driving our statistics is shoplifting. We just are way overrepresented in that area, and it reflects in our crime rate and puts us #1 on some national list that has no other information than the crime rate. Any questions at all?
Mr. Larson?
I know this is out of the north. Would you happen to know what the rate is in Chicago where they're having their nightly murders?
No, but I could send that to everybody in an email if you want. I can get to it within about 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Bailey?
I guess, is there something we can do that would increase or decrease our theft rate? You know, some of this is way beyond city and your control, of course, but I have felt for a long time that a lot of theft goes relatively unpunished. I mean, you guys are arresting people, but there's not a whole lot that happens after that. And again, I don't know if it's something we can do as a council, but to me, the system is pretty weak in that area. I don't know if that's appropriate for you to comment on that or not.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I think that is a really relevant question to ask, because as we know, crime is a very complex social problem. We know that in places where population density increases, crime increases, police calls for service increase. We can debate why that happens, but it's just statistically true across the nation. As we have multi-housing, there's more crime and more calls for service for police, for fire, and for EMS than there are on, you know, gated estates. It's because of the density of the population. We also know that as poverty levels increase, crime increases. There's a direct correlation statistically between that. Riverton is a relatively low-income town as compared to many other communities, and so that certainly has something that's driving our crime rates as well. When Mr. Varn was the county prosecutor, he went around to a lot of businesses and said, "Hey, I'm the man. What do you want me to do to help?" And to a person, all of the stores said, "We want you to do something about shoplifting." So Mr. Varn made a policy that in the county that all shoplifting cases had to go to his office. So we weren't allowed to write a municipal citation. It's not that we weren't allowed. He asked us to not write any citations in a municipal court for shoplifting, that all of those went to him so that he could make sure they were all dealt with appropriately. And after about 4 years of that, when they saw no appreciable change, they basically kind of released that policy and allowed it to go back to the way it had been. So, you know, the really disheartening part of theft is that we know that about 50% of all retail shrinkage is internal theft. And those aren't even being reflected in these numbers, right? Because generally speaking, when an employee steals and they get caught, they get terminated and not prosecuted. And so the disheartening part of it, if you will, is that's just the tip of the iceberg, I think, of the true theft problem in our community and in every community. It's a sad state of commentary on folks.
Mr. Canad.
Sir, just a quick question, and I don't want to single out Walmart, but I'll ask the question since they're the big retail store in town. What percentage of that do you think comes out of Walmart?
Mr. Mayor, I would say that the vast majority of those thefts are being generated at Walmart. But I want to give a caveat that they're not reporting the vast amount of theft that they have. So thank goodness, perhaps, that they're not as good at catching folks. They typically only call us when they've caught somebody. But when they do their year ends and their 6-month, retail catch-up, they're finding a tremendous amount of things that are missing, whether that's through shrinkage or whether that's through outright theft. I'm not really clear on that, but again, this is just reported crime, not actual crime. And so statistically, they are driving that number for us, but again, I think the picture could be much worse.
Chief, it's all the other crimes besides larceny that are on that list are all felonies, correct?
That as they report them, that's correct.
Okay, so we're reporting misdemeanor larcenies.
Yes, but so is everyone else in the United States.
So is everybody else in the United States?
Right.
Okay.
So there are some misdemeanor counts of arson and things like that, but by UCR statistics, that's why I hesitated to answer that a little bit, they're only capturing felony level crimes with the exception of larceny. Thank you.
Thank you. We're down to council committee reports and council members roundtable. Ms. Gibbon?
Well, I'm happy to report that I have something besides the senior center to report on, so that's exciting. We had the school district 25 rec board meeting on Monday the 12th at 7 o'clock here at the city hall, and we voted we paid the bills, and then we also voted on the individual volunteer of the year and then the business or organization of the year. And the volunteer of the year is our very own Lee Martinez, so that's pretty cool. And then the business is going to be Job Corps. So we'll be acknowledging and presenting them with plaques November 22nd at the school board meeting.
Great. And thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Okay. Sean?
Yes, sir. I'm happy to announce that the splash pad is diligently, busily working. There's been a lot of great support from the community, quite a few big ones here lately, and they have reached over $100,000 in funds. They have a couple of grants and stuff that are, dependent on matching and stuff like that, but they're starting to see a lot of progress and people are starting to step up. Bailey's has been a big part. RTO is doing a big thing for them where they're going to take portions of their earnings for certain times and donate it to it. So the community is really jumping on board and they're very appreciative of it, as am I, and I'm sure the whole council is, because it's something that'll bring something decent to the community for our kids and to try to, as we've talked about several times, to try to clean up City Park. And also, this Saturday, I had a chance to go out to the North Portal Fire Hall with Mr. Darren Coyle and a group of men out there, and we had 13 veterans from around the United States come in, and it's the Hunting with Heroes that they do every year out there. Everything was funded through donations from the landowners, from the community members and stuff like that, and it was just an awesome outpour of support for those veterans. Lifelong friendships were made out there. And it was just an awesome opportunity to see those guys, because some of them have been secluded for so long, just living in their own issues, because a lot of the scars that veterans have, are not on the outside, they're on the inside. Mm-hmm. To see some of those guys come out and to be able to enjoy an opportunity to come to Wyoming. One guy said, "I'll see you guys in about 2 months, I'm moving here." He said, "This is great." you know, and he was from California, so I said, yeah, I understand. But it was just a great opportunity to see those veterans get out and to see the support and community involvement that just, you know, really welcomed them and made them feel welcome. So it was an awesome opportunity. It was great, another great year of hunting with heroes.
Great, great. That's excellent. I heard another report on that today at Rotary, and so the people there were pretty excited about what they'd been involved in. So those are other people that had attended out there. Thought maybe 300 people were there to.
That's what they expected. And I mean, they filled the North Portal Power Hall, and it's a pretty big hall out there. So.
Yeah, good food.
Yeah, awesome food.
Rich Pingatzer cooked, and
Oh, yeah.
everybody was happy, and then
If you left hungry, it was your own fault.
yeah, and then there were guys that got to go shoot an antelope, right?
Yep.
Terrific.
Yeah, they all filled their tags, and
That's good deal. Mr. Larson?
I have nothing.
Nothing. Mr. Martinez?
Yes, on Monday, I attended the WHAM Board Directors meeting in Casper, and I'll give you a slide highlights of what happened. One of the items that the Board of Directors were decided to present to the Revenue Committee is give the cities and towns the ability to tax themselves instead of having to go through the county for a 1 cent sales tax or a half a cent sales tax. And 70% of the Wyoming populations live in towns and cities. And they also, we did get the WHAM region meeting, legislative committee, candidate exchange location. It was scheduled for the 18th, which is on a Tuesday. I was able to convince them to change it to the 20th of October here in Riverton at City Hall. And they're going to invite all the people that were elected in the primary to come and speak to us in Region 4. And that'll be at 1 o'clock here till 3. And short term, they want to change, the recommendation is change the sales tax rate from 4% to 5%. And they also want to change the mill levy to 8 mills for municipalities. I think right now it's only 6 or 7. And they also wanted to know if the WHAM cities and towns would support the bill that's in front of the legislature that's going to come up this February probably for the counties to each individually vote on if we want a sales tax on food. So that's all I have.
Mr. Canan? Nothing. Mr. Bailey?
Well, I apologize for being gone so much this month. I was traveling with my petroleum marketer duties. I did have the opportunity to ride on Denver Air Connections multiple times and had very good flights, and we're all on time, and also rode on Great Lakes. And then also, I guess I'd like to make sure everybody saw that in their emails, they got a list of all of the force projects that have been done since 2014, I think it is. And again, altogether, we've spent about $6.5 million improving the city's streets and curbs and gutters and lots of facilities. And I think it's awesome the amount of work that we've been able to get done. And again, I hope that that continues on. And again, it's a lot of stuff that was really needed, and the city didn't have the finance to do it by ourselves. So I think that's an awesome thing that we've been able to do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Weaver?
Councilman Peterson took my thunder. I was just going to announce that the splash pad has been awarded 2 grants in the last week. The first is the Rocky Mountain Power Foundation for $5,000. And then I think yesterday or the day before we got one from the Wyoming Community Foundation. That's a $10,000 challenge grant, which if you remember with the skate park, the challenge grant is 1 for 1. So, and it's based on monies that are, by the time when it's signed, then you have to raise the $10,000. So it doesn't count for any money that's been raised before then. So, But if we raise 10,000 towards that, then we'll get 10,000 for that and get 20 total, so. And I think they only applied for 3 grants, so we've gotten 2 of them so far. We don't know if we've heard on the 3rd, so that's pretty good. So we really appreciate the hard work of that group and working towards that splash pad. Thank you.
Thank you. So has this, I forget, remind me, does the city have any money pledged to help with this, or?
Yes, Your Honor. We were giving the Wyoming Community gas money, and we got that. I think you signed that. It was actually more than we thought. I think we told them we were going to give them 7, and I think it's over 9,000.
Okay. Boy, too bad that couldn't hold off a little bit and match the challenge, huh? Well, we still got work to do to match the challenge then. Okay. All right. So I guess it's, I already said a lot tonight. And we don't need an executive session. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mayor votes aye, and the motion passes, and we're adjourned at 8:10.